Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Fresh Start Show with Dr. Hope. And we are excited to be with you on this morning. So let's get ready, get up and get your favorite cereal and your favorite coffee going because we're ready to rock and roll on this morning on the Fresh Start Show. Get your Wheaties, get your Fruit Loops, get your Apple Jacks, get your pastries, your bagel with cream cheese, whatever you need. But it's going down this morning with Fresh Start with Dr. Hope. Hey, we are here here to talk about the real issues that we see in the justice system, in mental health, and with our brothers and sisters who have been incarcerated or who are currently incarcerated. Listen, the struggle is real. And it is time that we had a show that specifically speaks into what our brothers and sisters who are in the penal system or the state or federal prison system or the county jail system, that it is real. And many of our people from our community that has been incarcerated need much help and many resources. And so we're going to be talking about that on today. And so we're excited to be back to you every Saturday morning. We are here at 7:30 on 106 The Groove and 10:30 at 10:30 a.m. on The Voice. And so Fresh Start is here to talk about the issues. The issues are real. The struggle is real. And primarily our show is to talk about issues with the justice system in regards to justice reform, talk about issues with the mental health, and also to talk about the issues that our formerly incarcerated people are constantly going through as far as their struggles of being incarcerated. So listen, we got a great show for you today. It's just going to be me today, no guests. Got great information for you in regards to our episode today. And so today I'm going to be going more into the mental health arena, and talking about trauma and talking about what does it look like to go through and experience trauma. And so not only am the founder of Fresh Start organization, but I am also a trauma and mental health expert. And so today I want to talk about a teaching, well, not a teaching, more of a training and some research I've done on mental health in the prison system. And so I did some research and a training called the traumatization of incarceration. Let me say that again, the traumatization of incarceration. And pretty much that research was talking about what impact does the prison system have on the brains and minds of those that are currently incarcerated and the brains and minds of those who have been formerly incarcerated. And what I found out in my data and what I have found out in my research is that prison has a traumatizing impact on those who have been incarcerated or those who are currently incarcerated. And the reason why I did this work is because I don't think that we do enough to humanize those who are incarcerated. You know, we look at those that are in prison as the scum of the earth. We look at those that are in prison as if they are some devils or they are animals. But let me tell you, those that are in prison, those who have made some bad choices in life are human, just like you and I. And it is about time that we start humanizing those who are incarcerated and those who are formerly incarcerated. And this is what this show about. I was recently inspired. I went to my mailbox, my business mailbox today, and I actually received 2 letters from people who wrote me from in prison because they heard of the Fresh Start show. That really inspired me. That really uplifted my spirit to let me know that I'm on the right path. And as a matter of fact, that's what they wrote me about, was to let me know that they appreciated the show. They said that we've never even heard of a show ever that speaks into the issues of prison, that speaks into the issues of being incarcerated. We didn't even know this show existed. One writer told me we just happened to leave the radio on early in the morning, and he said the Fresh Start show just came on, and we were just really shocked to hear that there was someone with a show that spoke about our particular issues. And so they wanted to let me know that they really, really appreciated this show and to continue to keep speaking on it. They said, we are spot on. He said that the topics that you're talking about, the issues that you're talking about, the struggles that you're talking about are spot on. What you've been talking about really speaks into the struggle of what people that are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated are going through. So again, I want to thank you. And if you're listening to this show and this show is really being a blessing, this show is being an inspiration to you, and you are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, please let me know that. Please write me, just like the other gentleman wrote me. Please write me at 1830 East Broadway Boulevard, Suite 124, Box 266. That is Suite 124, Box 266, Tucson, Arizona, 85719. So again, please write me to let me know if this show is really speaking into your situation, or speaking into your son's situation, your daughter's situation, your nephew's situation, your cousin or your brother's situation who've been incarcerated. Please write me. Again, that address is 1830 East Broadway Boulevard, Suite 124, Box 266, and it is Tucson, Arizona, 85719. And we're just excited for all those that's been listening. So let's get to it. So we're talking about the traumatization of incarceration. In other words, we're talking about the mental health of those that have been incarcerated. And so in a lot of my studies and research, what I found is that those that have been incarcerated have been directly impacted by their mental health. Yes, there are some that came into prison, being convicted and sentenced into prison with already their pre-existing conditions of mental health. But then there are some that have not had any history of mental health, but when they went to prison and when they spent time in prison, they began to develop mental illnesses and psychiatric disorders. There are many that have been incarcerated, suffer from depression and suffer from bipolar and suffer from schizophrenia. There are many that also have issues with suicide ideations, where they think about killing themselves and committing suicide. There's been history of those that are in prison that have post-traumatic stress disorder and came out with PTSD, and still to this day, even after being released from prison, are still having those intrusive thoughts and having insomnia where they can't sleep, having symptoms such as being depressed or having anxiety. And this is even years after being in prison. So when we are talking about incarcerated issues from a mental health perspective, let me tell you, the struggle is real. Now, let me talk about trauma. Now, I'm a certified traumatologist and a trauma crisis specialist, and I totally understand how powerful the trauma can be on the brain and minds of individuals. So one of the things I like to do is define trauma. So when we look at trauma, trauma is defined as a psychological, emotional wound to the brain. And these wounds take place when life-devastating and life-threatening circumstance happens to people. And what happens is when people are traumatized or exposed to trauma, and I also like to introduce the 3 E's of trauma, which is the experience, which is the event, and which is the exposure. And when these 3 E's take place in an individual, it can not only impact the brain, but it can also what we would call rewiring of the brain. And so trauma, again, is a psychological wound that happens when life-devastating things or life-threatening things happen to someone. It can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be verbal, and certainly it can be sexual. And it certainly has a direct impact on the brain. Now, this is very important because when I did my research and started looking into this as the traumatization of incarceration, what we found was being in prison and the conditions that take place in prison and the maladaptive relationships that prisoners have with prison guards is very traumatizing, and it is very disturbing. And so what we saw is when individuals go into prison immediately, they are confined. And so that has an impact on the brain. Then, based on your ethnicity or race, there's what we would call gangs inside of prison. And a lot of those are disseminated by race and ethnicity. And so you have to find your alignment being in prison. And if you don't get aligned with a gang, then we know that you can have a horrific experience being in prison. You will have to watch your back, which also impacts the brain too. Then also the violence that we see, worrying about being shanked or being stabbed, or feeling the nervousness or the anxiety of going into a shower, not knowing that you could get shanked or stabbed, or get your neck slit open. I mean, the violence is real. That, ladies and gentlemen, impacts the brain. Another thing we look at is the sexual assaults and how prisoners are brutally raped and sexually assaulted. Also impacts the brain and can create and cause a rewiring. The horrible food that they eat, poor nutrition. I think a lot of times we don't understand how important nutrition is. And let me speak from not only a traumatologist, but as a nutritionist perspective, that food affects your mood. And when you give people who are incarcerated in prison poor nutrition that lacks the vitamins and minerals, that lacks the fiber, that lacks all of the macro and micronutrients, that only just doesn't impact the body, ladies and gentlemen, that also impacts your brain. And when people are eating bad foods, being incarcerated, and usually that takes place in our county jails, that usually takes place in our state and federal penitentiaries, that they're not eating the best vitamin-rich, holistic, rich type of food. So their nutrition is horrible, and food affects your mood. And then what we have studies have seen, when formerly incarcerated people have poor nutrition and eating food that lacks the vitamins and the minerals and the nutrients that they need, that it impacts brain cells, it impacts the ability to stay regulated, it impacts behavior. You feed for people that's incarcerated like animals. Believe it or not, they can act like animals, because poor nutrition impacts brain function, and it impacts brain development. It impacts neurons and neurotransmitters. It impacts the way how the brain connect and is stimulated, and certainly it impacts levels of regulation. And when people who are in prison cannot stay regulated, they get dysregulated. And then they began to see all of this violence because of, as well, how they're treated and also how they are fed. And then we also have to look at how traumatizing is with prison guards, the way that they treat many of those who are in prison. It is very traumatizing. It is very horrific on some levels, on how the relationship between those who are in prison and the prison guards. And many have spoke about many times how they have been unfairly untreated, and how unfairly they've been treated like dogs, treated like animals, constantly disrespected. I mean, on so many levels. And I think it is time that we start having those conversations in regards to those who are incarcerated. What is their mental health? What are the psychiatric disorders and the mental illnesses that takes place in prison and in jail? And we know it's very, very real. And many of those who are incarcerated do not even get the treatment that they deserve. Many of them are just sitting and rotting, and their mental illness and their psychiatric disorders are worsening. and it's been exacerbated. And by the time that they are released from prison, many of those who have been formerly incarcerated are not the same. Let me say that again. They are not the same. They have symptoms of PTSD. They have symptoms of depression. They have symptoms of anxiety. They have symptoms of schizophrenia and sometimes personality disorders. I mean, the list goes on and on. And so, as a doctor of psychology, I think it's important that we understand that we have to do better on making sure that those who are incarcerated are getting the treatments, are getting the medicine, that are getting all of the support they need so that they can live a more happier and a more thriving life. You might be shocked to know this, but it takes a brain to do everything. It takes a brain to talk. It takes a brain to walk. It takes a brain to learn. It takes a brain to remember. It takes a brain to have memory. It takes a brain to go to college. It takes a brain to get a job, interview for the job. It takes a brain to do everything. And when the brain is not working on and performing on optimum levels, then the quality of life is diminished and the quality of life is compromised. I always say, in order to really change somebody's life, you must first heal the brain. The brain must be addressed first, which is what I consider the hardware, and the mind is what we would call the software. Many times we try to change mindsets, which is the software, without addressing the brain, which is the hardware. If we focus on the brain and hardware, it gets easier when we begin to shift mindsets, which is the software. All of that is impacted through mental illness, and many of that comes from being in prison. So listen, if you're listening, you're not the only one. If you're listening to this show and you're incarcerated, and I'm speaking into your issue right now, you're not alone. Many times we think about mental illness, we feel alone. We feel like we're on an island by ourselves. But let me tell you, you are not alone. 1 out of 5 Americans in this country struggles with a mental illness. So you are not alone. 73% of people who have trauma have developed that through early childhood trauma. And many times people who've also been to prison have a lot of early childhood trauma that has never been addressed. And so that impacts behaviors, which also opens the door to not only mental illness, but substance abuse. And a lot of times people use substance abuse as a defense mechanism to help them cope with their pain and help them cope with their brokenness and help them cope with their trauma. Well, the problem with that is you now have 2 problems. One, you still never dealt with the trauma that made you even seek out addictions. But then once you went into dealing with drugs and alcohol and things of that nature, you develop an addiction. So now you got 2 problems. Now the third problem is it impacts how you make choices. And sometimes we don't make the best choices and we break the law and we end up getting caught. And so now we have a third problem. We still got the same trauma we never dealt with. Now we have an addiction because we was using drugs and substance abuse to help us cope with the trauma we never existed. And then we make a bad decision that impacts our freedom, and now we are in prison. Listen, that is a lot of people's story. Many people have been impacted by this. But let me tell you, there's a way out. If you are going through some major situations for our psychiatric disorders, that's been prison-based or that's been jail-based because of being confined, please get the help that you need. Make sure that you're seeing your therapist. Make sure that you get a counselor. Make sure you get that psychologist or psychiatrist that can help you through this, because the trauma is real. Again, the traumatization of incarceration is certainly real. We began to see that when people come out of prison, they're not necessarily the same like the way they went in. Their brain have been impacted. Their minds have shifted. There are so many things that have impacted them, but you can reverse all of these things by taking your healing into your hands, making sure that you get the help. If you have been released from prison and you feel like you're not the same, get the help you need. One of the things, too, about the traumatization of incarceration is I talk to many former offenders and those who have been incarcerated, and they would tell me that when they came out, they were so detached that by the time they tried to hug their kids or their kids tried to show affection, they just didn't even know what to do with that affection because they spent all their time in prison dissociating and detaching. And it's not as easy as it sounds once you have spent years of detaching that all of a sudden you can attach emotionally all over again. But all of that, ladies and gentlemen, have so much to do with the traumatization of incarceration. When you have been in prison, how the environment of prison has impacted your brain, impacted your mind, impacted your body, and impacted your spirit. So listen, there's healing. You can heal from trauma, but you got to get the help that you need. So it's not just about just getting a job when you get out of prison. Certainly you need one, but it's not just about that. It's not just about getting housing. Certainly you need housing, but it's not just about that. What's more important is you got to get your mind right. Let me say that again. You must get your mind right. It takes the brain to do everything. You can't get a job. You can't get a house if you don't have a working brain and a healed brain. So you have to do the things that you need to do to take care of yourself. Listen, I don't have that much time left in this segment, but let me tell you, get the help that you need. Get a hold of your doctor. See if they can refer you over to a counselor or to a therapist that can help you reverse many of those traumatic experiences that happened while you was incarcerated. You can heal. Trauma may not be your fault, but certainly trauma is all our responsibility to heal from trauma, because if you don't heal from trauma, you will bleed on people that didn't cut you. So it's time for you to stop leading and bleeding. It's time for you to start healing from the things that you've been through. Listen, if you want to reach out to me, again, you can write me at 1830 East Broadway Boulevard, Suite 124, Box 266. That's Suite 124, Box 266, Tucson, Arizona, 85719. Listen, this October, Fresh Start is coming back to you in the city of Tucson. We're looking for some amazing things to take place. We're bringing all of our courts right back down to the convention center, our city courts, our superior courts, our justice courts, our juvenile courts, plus our county attorney's office, our public defender's office, to help people get on their feet. We're going to be working with city courts as well to help people. You may have a pending warrant. We want to do some warrant squashing. We're going to squash some warrants again this year. If you got court fees and fines you need help on, we want to help you with that. If you got a suspended driver's license, we want you to work with the courts, get on a payment plan so you can get your driver's license reinstated. I mean, this is the real deal. We are helping marijuana, we turn around marijuana conventions through marijuana expungements. We're going to be helping people get their voters' rights back. If you was a voter and you got a felony, right now, according to state law, you are disenfranchised to be a voter with a felony. But you can get your voters' rights back through a process, okay? So please feel free to write me. I can help you get back on your feet. Remember, Fresh Start Expo is coming back on Saturday, October 22nd from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's going to be at the convention center. So this is in October. Have your neighbor, your friend, your family member, everybody come down to the Fresh Start. If you have a felony and you're ready to get on your feet, we're here to help you. So again, meet us there or beat us there October 22nd at the Tucson Convention Center. The mayor is going to come and speak again. Laura Conover, our county attorney, is going to come and speak again. We're going to have many different keynotes and guests and speakers that's going to be there. We will be offering child care. So if you don't have a babysitter that particular Saturday on the 22nd of October, then bring your kid with you. And we are going to offer free child care service for you. We will have all kind of different vendors from primary care and behavioral health and all of those different things. It's a one-stop shop for those who've been formerly incarcerated. So listen, meet us there, beat us there this coming October 22nd from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Tucson Convention Center. And we are looking to do some amazing things. As our mission statement says, where Fresh Start is an organization where everyone gets a new beginning. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. It's time to start over. and you deserve a fresh start. So again, thank you for being with me. I'll be back here next Saturday at 7:30. Meet me here, beat me here, and have a wonderful Saturday morning.